It's time to make sports talk great again with Curt Schilling and Steve Deace.
Happy Tuesday, back here after a long President's Day weekend here on The Blaze, where we talk sports. I am Steve Deace. He is World Series champion, future Hall of Famer Curt Schilling. Good to see you, brother. You ready to go?
Ready to go.
We put 25 minutes on the clock, get to as many of the day's sports topics in that amount of time as we possibly can, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on a podcast, or watching right here on The Blaze, beginning right now. So some ground rules on this Kaepernick conversation. This is about his athletic prowess, where he belongs on the field. Because what's being lost here is everybody decides to turn him into a story trope, and most of that is because that's what he is preferred to do rather than be known as a player. But both sides of this are now clickbaiting the H-eatable hockey sticks out of this. And now that he has settled out of court with the NFL for an undetermined amount of money, I don't buy the estimates that it's 60 to 80 million, but I would also guess, though, that it's fairly significant. Now that he has settled out of court with them, he was approached by the Alliance for American Football about playing in their league, which is essentially being back channel funded by the NFL. And he told them that he demanded $20 million or more to play in their league. That is according to the Associated Press, by the way. All right. So that's not according to, we do rightwingsports.com. That's the Associated Press reporting that. OK, so here's what I want to do, because there's been a lot of conversation about this and about him and his beliefs, not so much him as a player. But now that one professional league is showing interest in him as a player and another one has settled with him out of court, his agent has said he would love to come back to the NFL. Here's what I would like us to do. I would like us to try to be the adults in this conversation if it is now possible. All right. And understand that it's not a question. You can't just look at his stats as a standalone, because he's the quarterback of a team and he's let it be known he wants to use your team as a platform for his beliefs. However, this whole right-wing story trope of the last few years, and I say this is a right-winger, Colin Kaepernick sucks, Dace. Well, in his last year in the NFL, he had a 16-4 touchdown interception ratio and 91 QBR and completed 60% of his passes. That's really good, guys. Lifetime for a career, his QBR is nearly 90. Not the pass efficiency rating, the hardcore QBR that we really measure how good quarterbacks are. All right, so clearly there was slippage after Harbaugh left for the NFL. He went from a guy that looked like he might be a perennial Pro Bowler to just pretty good, but he doesn't suck either. However, what should be noted is while he was putting up those numbers his last season, I mentioned that are really good efficiency numbers, I think his team went 1-12 or 1-11 in his starts. And this is why you've got to look at this, I think, Curt, holistically. Because, and it's not even that he's a right guard. He is the face of a franchise as the quarterback. And he wants to use your team as a platform for his beliefs. So the question you have to ask yourself, it really is, how good does his play have to be for me to put up with the additional baggage of those beliefs? Let me give an analogy that you and I both, who don't agree with Kaepernick's politics, we're not saying this is a moral equivalency, okay? But if the Ray Rice video had come out after he'd averaged 5.1 yards a carry, would he have been back in the NFL? Yeah, I believe so. Eventually. But it came out after he averaged 3.7. That's why he's never played in the NFL. See what I'm saying? The baggage. You really think so? Yeah, I do. I think if he had averaged 5.1 the previous year, a team would have taken a chance on him. Yeah, I do. I think
one of the most disturbing videos I've ever seen.
So I want to start twofold with one. I'd like you to explain to our audience, as someone that's been in a locker room, in a diverse setting, and there's no position like quarterback in baseball, but you guys are together so often that the volume almost makes up for the presence of this one singular position, and what it is like when you have a personality that is so much more dominant. How much does his production have to be before it doesn't grate on you, before it doesn't become a distraction? Can you just talk about that as a general construct first?
So I would tell you that it's my impression that first of all, I'm not going to bring a guy in like this if I'm not planning on him being the main reason I win a Super Bowl, because there is so much baggage, and I don't think he's that guy. I mean, listen, I'm going to, I was railing against the fact that he was a horrible quarterback, and it turns out he wasn't as bad as I thought he was. But they were 1-10 in his last season. And granted, listen, the quarterback can only do so much. And I get that, but there is no scenario for me under which any team, other than a team trying to regain presence in the media, would sign this guy. There's no situation where it's worth it, because if you remember back when in the early 2000s, we had Manny Ramirez and all of the stuff that went with it, and in 2004 he was 330, 45, and 150. So that's fine. And he kept doing that thing until it became too much. Eventually it became, this is would have been a first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the greatest hitters that ever lived. And it got to the point where you were just, here's the thing.
Hold up 1 second. I like the Manny Ramirez analogy, which again, it's not morally equivalent, but in terms of a persona that overshadows an entire team. So early in his career, Colin Kaepernick was putting up those kinds of Manny Ramirez numbers. All right.
Seriously, for what? How many years in your mind was he a good quarterback?
I would say about almost 2.5 years, maybe. Okay. And then I would say what happened, and in football terms, that's a long time. When you're only playing 16 games. What I would then say is now he is kind of a 280, and he's gone from a 330 hitter to a 280 hitter. He's gone from a 35-40 home run guy to a 20-25 home run guy. He's gone from a 130, 140 RBI guy to an 80, 90 RBI guy. I think those are fair analogies. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
If you look at the numbers the last few years before he was essentially shadow banned from the league. Okay. So if you look at those numbers, those are pretty good numbers. Okay. The question though becomes, I can't just look at those because all these,
you don't just get the numbers.
That's right. All these sports writers that are sympathetic to his politics don't understand. Yes, those numbers are better than Josh McCown for the Jets. Okay. But when I put him in New York and you guys blow everything he does and says and makes it a story that overshadows my team, and it's the lead story on SportsCenter every night, and Jamel Hill has turned her Twitter account essentially into a love letter, okay, to this guy. And the president of the United States is trolling me from the White House, okay, and every primetime host on Fox News every night. And even in New York, a good portion of my season ticket base doesn't agree with this crap and hates it, okay? How good does he have to be in order for me to accept the circus? And there's a point, as you mentioned, with Manny Ramirez, you reach a diminishing returns, right?
He has to be good enough to win a Super Bowl. Because first of all, as an organization, I don't want to deal with 16 weeks of those questions, because they're going to be 16 weeks of those questions. You're going to get asked every week about kneeling. And as a player, the game's hard enough. I don't want to, we used to have a saying here in Boston, you had to play 3 games a day. You had to play the media game before the game. You had to play the game. Then you had to play the media game after.
Yeah.
Kaepernick's the same. Wherever he goes, it would be the same way. And here's
is it almost worse in the NFL where it's 1 game a week? And so you can't redeem yourself the very next day?
Think about that. Tom Brady had a MAGA hat in the back of his locker. And we spent 2 weeks on sports radio here talking about him being the Antichrist.
Yeah, because there's not a game the next day where Manny Ramirez misses practice, gets kicked out of the lineup, but comes back tomorrow, has 3 home runs, and it's like it never happened.
And in New England, it's different. In New England, you play 162 NFL games during a baseball season because the fans will break it down within a week for 24 hours. But that's what's going to follow him. And so in the end, for me, it's unless you're going to win. Here's the thing. There's actually 2 points here. Number one, he doesn't really want to play.
You don't think so?
No.
What makes you say that as an athlete that he doesn't really want to play?
Because there's if the sport was his first love, he's had offers. He opted out of his contract, first off. Everybody forgets that point.
That's true. Yes.
He chose to walk away from that contract, which was his choice. He's been offered opportunities to get back on the field. And if you love the sport, you play the sport. He's got a social message that he wants to tell. So in his mind, and I'm still frustrated that the fact that this all became a story because what he did was kneel for a lie. There's no data that backs up the lie of disproportional violence to black youth. None anywhere ever. FBI, CDC, nobody. But that's been buried a long time ago. This guy is an icon for groups. They were talking about having him on as one of the icons for Black History Month, and to show you how far in some circles they think he's gone. And I think what he did was a great disservice. The statements he made about our law enforcement, both physically made those statements and verbally made those statements, and the clothing he wore. And listen, one of the things that I was very caught up in when this all happened, if you remember, right around the time that this all happened, he was reportedly met and started dating a young lady who was a very devout Muslim, and my understanding was that he had converted to Islam, and then you
Islam
had
or Nation of Islam, because those are two different things.
Right. And I don't doubt that has some bearing on what he's done since then. And I'm not saying good or bad. I'm saying that's been, he's been kind of the in a sense, he's, what he's been to me? He's been the Black Panther with his fist up at the Olympics without the oppression.
So NFL.com, heading into free agency, just did their rankings of quarterback situations in the NFL. Okay. These are the 5 worst in alphabetical order. Now, I don't necessarily agree with these ratings. I think the Bills probably feel pretty good about their young quarterback. I'm not sure how the Cardinals feel about theirs. Okay, but these are the teams with the 5 most questionable quarterback situations heading into this offseason. All right, so I'm going to give you just. Would you rather have this Colin Kaepernick fit here and upgrade this team when you look at athletically what he brings to the table and the baggage? The Buffalo Bills. Your thoughts?
No, I still think Josh Allen has a chance to be decent. Again, I'll tell you on this list, there's no scenario I take Colin Kaepernick over any of these quarterbacks. None.
Well, Josh Allen played very well the last month of the year. All right. Yes. And they just invested a high first-round pick for him. So You're not going to make that move there. The Cardinals, he was already in Arizona, remember. Right. Okay. And you have a new coaching staff there that's going to want to run more of an air raid system. Now, I'm not sure Josh Rosen fits that system either. And Kyler Murray has the same agent as the new coach, Cliff Kingsbury. Right. But I don't know that he's an offensive scheme fit for what Cliff Kingsbury wants to do there. The Dolphins.
And before you go any further, I'll make this argument. This is a quarterback who needs a system built around him. This is not a quarterback that can come in my opinion, can come in and convert to the system you're playing.
Yeah, I agree, but that's true of probably all but 6 quarterbacks in the NFL. That's probably true. They're so good that they transcend a system.
Right,
okay?
but many of those are so good.
Like Josh Allen, we just talked about, you're not putting him in a West Coast offense. If he can't run, then I know we have our racial stereotypes, but this is a white boy that runs real well. If he's in a system where he's not a runner, he's not utilized as a runner, much like a Colin Kaepernick, you are really devaluing what he brings to the table. So I agree with you on that.
I also look at Josh Allen as a guy whose offensive ability opens up the offense. Because if he can throw in addition to his mobility, he allows you to do a lot more.
Well, and that's the argument that's what Kaepernick originally brought to the table in his career. The Dolphins would be an interesting fit. That's a very progressive-oriented community in Miami. Their quarterback situation has been a black hole for years. The owner of the Miami Dolphins is the University of Michigan's biggest donor. And, of course, Jim Harbaugh is the guy that essentially took a chance on Kaepernick coming out of college when he drafted him out of Nevada, and molded him into the player he was for a while. But you have Brian Flores, the new head coach there. They're going to move on from Ryan Tannehill because he can't stay healthy. And he's a Patriot guy. I can't see a Patriot, a Bill Belichick disciple, saying, yes, bring the circus to my franchise. I just don't. Right. That's just not typically the culture of what you come out of there. The Jaguars, I don't see that working at all because, the old motto about Florida is the further south you go, the further north you get. Okay, so you're talking about now you're getting closer to that really conservative panhandle area there. No, I don't see that. That dog ain't going to hunt there. I don't in that city. DC, I think he'd find all kinds of support there. I don't see him in the owner as a fit there. The Daniel Snyder situation. No. So tell me, I think he's better than Josh Allen. He's better than Josh Rosen. Now, I think Josh Allen may end up being better than him. We'll see. He's better than Ryan Tannehill. He's better than Blake Bortles. I don't think he's as good as Alex Smith, but I'm not sure Alex Smith's ever going to play again.
All right.
Okay?
So
but the situation, does the baggage he brings worth signing him in any of those situations? That's the question.
let me ask you a question. I'm gonna throw some names at you. All right. I want to give you first list: Joe Montana, Tom Brady, Eli Manning, Mark Brunell, Brett Favre, Boomer Esiason, Donovan McNabb. You know all those guys. Pretty damn good quarterbacks, right?
Sure.
That was his career comps after his 4th year in the NFL.
Wow.
Yeah. Year 5 was Josh Freeman, Jim Plunkett, Matt Hasselbeck, McNair, Mariota, Charlie Johnson, Romo, John Hadle, Chris Miller, Jim Hart. That was his 5th year.
Those are still some really good quarterbacks. They're not as good as the first list, but there's guys that have won Super Bowls and taken teams to the playoffs on that list. Yeah.
Listen to some of the names for his career: Elvis Gerbach, Stan Humphries.
He led a team to a Super Bowl.
Okay. Blake Bortles,
who was in the AFC Championship game. Yeah.
Jay Fiedler.
Yeah.
David Carr, Scott Mitchell, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr.
Well, and that speaks to what we were describing. Okay. Now, Derek Carr has been a good quarterback.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins was for about 10 minutes the highest paid player in the NFL. Okay. Yep. So there's some. The points you're saying is we're reaching the point of diminishing returns.
Right.
I don't think it's all his skill set. Again, I think it's a combination. It is, and this is. You know what? One final thing on this, and we'll move on. Okay. You're a really opinionated guy. Everybody knows that, okay? I don't know you well enough yet to know. Did you just get more outspokenly conservative after your playing days? Did you hold some of these views when you were playing? But when you're on a team and you were one of the faces of the Red Sox, for example, one of the faces of the Diamondbacks, your hometown team. That was a big coup, bringing you in and everything else. Do you have to make a decision that I could be a good player and say what I want to say? Or I could be a great player and realize if I'm great, then when this is over, I'll have a platform to say what I want the rest of my life. But I've got to prioritize being a great player right now, because you'll notice that there's been a diminishing return here. Also, not just coinciding with when Harbaugh left, but when he chose to become more outspoken as well. Right. There's only so much time in the day. So every time that you're focused on something other than getting better, that's time you're taking away from getting better, isn't it? I don't know. You tell us.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I was not nearly. I held the same views, but it wasn't something. It wasn't a topic that was brought up often. I mean, there were guys that I lived to argue. Gabe Kapler was one. I had a great time debating in the locker room, and it was fun. It was because it was a lot of give and take. There was no hardcore. After 2004, when I came out and supported President Bush, that's when things went downhill for me with the sports media. That's when I got to realize how many frauds and phonies there were, and how it was so horribly skewed to be liberal. But those same guys got to see me behind the scenes, and that's probably the most disappointing thing, was that the media will join the throng as long as it pushes an agenda, because these guys saw me behind the scenes. They know I'm not any of the things that anybody's ever said about me. I mean, you don't get brought up in a more racially diverse environment than Major League Baseball. And if you had a racist or homophobic feel to you, that comes out over 22 years. So, but I'm telling you right now, he is not going to be worth the headache unless somebody believes he's the missing piece, unless he makes them the Super Bowl contender they want to be. There's nothing worth bringing him in for, because you're going to have nothing but clubhouse issues, locker room issues, and there are guys that just don't want to deal with that stuff.
Let's move on. Get to your home sport, Major League Baseball. A couple of big imminent retirement announcements over the weekend, one by a player, one by a manager. CC Sabathia announcing 2019 will be his final season in the majors. I saw this stat, blew me away. So he's 14 Ks shy of 3,000 for his career, which means he'll likely get it in his first couple of starts of the season, provided he stays healthy. He would be only the third southpaw in the history of the game.
Isn't that incredible?
To get to 3,000 strikeouts. I mean, that is incredible. The other two, your former teammate Randy Johnson, and one of the original crafty lefties, Steve Carlton. By the way, you're going to learn about me, Curt. One of my life goals is to be called crafty. I've always wanted to be crafty. All right.
Yeah, that's never going to happen.
Yeah, I know it's not. So, CC Sabathia, I assume definite Hall of Famer in your view. There's a pause.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's going to make the Hall of Fame, and I love him to death, and it's very hard for me to do this. But I think, yes, it's going to be kind of one of those things where you look at the numbers, and I think maybe the more you look at him, the better he'll get.
Tell me, then Mike Mussina just got in.
Yeah.
Doesn't have 3,000 Ks. Doesn't have 300 wins. I don't know. Did he ever win a Cy Young? And then he did win 15 games or more 11 times. That's basically he's Don Sutton without 300 wins. Okay, so tell me why Mike Mussina gets in over a guy that at the height of his career was an MVP candidate type of pitcher.
Yeah. No, I think it's one of those things that on the surface for me, I never just said CC Hall of Famer, but I think when you look at his career, yes, I think he's going to end up being a Hall of Famer. And if the writers are that adamant about character, then that'll get him in for the most part because he's a super guy and a super teammate. So I never used
why have there not been a lot of great lefty strikeout guys? Explain that.
Well, first of all, lefties are a rarity to begin with, right? And most of the lefties, you just don't have a lot of power lefties who have endurance. I mean, you look at 3,000 strikeout guys that could have been. You know, you think about
Sandy Koufax.
Yeah, right. Koufax. You think about oh my goodness, the lefty Mark Langston.
Yeah, the old like, Expo Seattle Mariner.
Yep. There are a lot of guys, but they just didn't have long career. Jim Abbott could have been a 3,000 strikeout guy. He was a power guy.
Go blue.
Dave Righetti. Dave Righetti. People forget he was kind of Dennis Eckersley before Eckersley pulled that off, which is a really good starter to then became an elite closer in the majors. Yeah, and I could go on.
Ron Guidry, if we're going to go Yankees, how about Ron Guidry? You know, there was a period there in the late 70s where he was maybe the most dominant pitcher, one of the most dominant pitchers in all of baseball, right?
It's just rare. It's rare. Lefties are a much smaller portion of the public to begin with,
right?
But then even a smaller subset in the big leagues. But yeah, you know what?
Tom Glavine wasn't a big strikeout guy,
right?
Yeah.
No, but he was a winner, and I think in the end, when you think about the fact that the era that CC played in, where he played, the more I look at it, yes, he is a Hall of Famer. But at first blush, I wasn't jumping on it. But 3.7 ERA. He's played most of his career in the AL East and the AL Central when it was good. Although he was on the team you didn't want to face in Cleveland.
All I know is even when my Tigers were at their pinnacle, he owned us, man. I mean, he rented space in our heads for 6 years. We could not beat him. He owned us.
My favorite run of his was 17 games in 2008 when he gets traded to Milwaukee.
Yeah, he
starts basically on 2 hours rest, three straight times. Goes 11-2 with a 1.6 and carries them. And it got into a Twitter conversation last night about some of the greatest deadline acquisitions, and he's right up there with
Doyle
Alexander.
That was the season I was thinking of that. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so
he's a Hall of Famer.
Bruce Bochy. Now, there's only been 4 managers since the expansion era in 1961. That would be the year that the Mets and other teams were introduced. There's only been 4 managers since then that have won 3 or more World Series. Sparky Anderson, Joe Torre, Tony La Russa, and this guy, Bruce Bochy. He announced, I think this came out of left field because they were just making a huge play for Bryce Harper. And I think there may be a subplot there. We'll get to that in just a second. But he announced that this is going to be his last season as well. I know this is a guy you have an immense amount of regard for.
And by the way, his nickname's Shrek because his head is he has that 8.5 head size, largest head in the big leagues ever. And he's just a great guy. Never, and this is one of those things that you don't see. Have never heard a player in any capacity complain about him as a person or a manager. And when you play, I mean, even 5 years, that's something. If you play in the game as long as he has been, he's 4 decades in the game. Astonishing accomplishment. And I would argue that the Giants don't have any world championships if he isn't managing them. I think his ability to get the most out of that team and see the guy behind him had the same roster for the most part and couldn't manage to close it out.
Well, they never won one in San Francisco before he was the manager, right?
Nope.
Yeah.
And this guy was one of the biggest. When I look back on teams that have won the World Series and I think about there's very few World Series where I think about if the manager hadn't been the manager, they wouldn't have won. Think about the Cardinals and the Rangers. If Ron Washington wasn't managing the Rangers, I think they might have won. If Tony La Russa wasn't managing the Cardinals, I don't know that they would have one. I think the same thing about Bochy and the world titles that San Francisco's done. And let me just say also a shout out to, I know this might sound weird, but San Francisco is one of the best baseball cities on the planet. It is East Coast baseball on the West Coast from a fan perspective. And to be leaving that environment, he's probably just tired and ready to go fishing.
This has got to have some Bryce Harper subplots here, right? You
think so? I don't.
So you think a Bruce Bochy less Giants would still be an attractive destination to him?
I don't know. I don't know what he's after. I can't figure out what he's after. Right? I'm not really
because when we talked about this may be down to Philadelphia and San Francisco last week, your big selling point was one guy walks into that meeting and says, hey, I've got rings. And the other guy, your former teammate, Gabe Kapler, says, you can help us establish something here. Right. Now that guy says, I'm leaving after this coming season, I've got to think that diminishes their potential to sign him.
Unless and I'm not saying this is happening because the McGowans are not, they run their team and they've always been very good about running that team. But there's also a conversation to be had where behind the scenes, Bryce Harper might have said, yeah, I'm interested as long as the guy replacing Bochy is X.
Meaning I want to pick the manager, essentially.
I'm not saying
this is the NBA now?
No, I'm just saying that those things do happen. And I'm not saying this is happening here, but I would argue that if he was retiring and they had a chance to get Harper, he wouldn't have announced it until after they signed him. Because if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Why on earth would you short yourself of potential Hall of Fame talent in your final year?
Which is exactly why I think the odds of him going there are now slim and none.
I think
that's exactly why I think that.
Yeah, no, I think this throws them out the window.
Yeah.
No doubt in my mind, because that managerial uncertainty is a huge – manager is one of the main reasons why a lot of guys sign someplace.
But, again, if you're a Cubs or somebody else and you want to come in here at the 11th hour, he could have signed with the Phillies essentially since, the week before Thanksgiving, this entire time. And he has not done so. There must be a reason why. Okay.
Well, the Cubs could come in at the 12th hour and give him a $50 million one-year deal.
Yeah, you might as well give it a shot. All they can do is say no, right?
And
that's all they can do
for $50 million for a year.
Right. Exactly. All right, Curt. Good stuff. We'll do it again tomorrow.
Yep. Take care.
Take care.